I I can be Raheem and Bishop and all them, and you can be the Puerto Rican gang. What was his name? Lazarus or something?
Ugh, I don't remember. I don't think I'm sure the crew had a name, but I don't remember what the specific dude's name was. I thought he was Italian the first time I watched it.
I had no idea what he was until I watched it again this past week.
So, for those of you at home who have no idea what this is that we are talking about, it is J.U. Ice, Ice, Ice. Not like the DJ, but like the movie starring Tupac Shakur. Now, according to Wikipedia, and this is where it gets really interesting, is the movie came out in 1992. But there's a lot of really interesting backstory to the movie and how it came to be. But according to Wikipedia, Juice is a 1992 American crime thriller directed by Ernest R. Dickerson, and written by Dickerson and Gerard Brown. It stars Omar Epps, Tupac Shakur, Jermaine Hopkins, and Khalil Kain. The film touches on the lives of 4 Black youths growing up in Harlem following their day-to-day activities, their struggles with police harassment, rival neighborhood gangs, and their families. The film is the writing and directing debut of Dickerson and features Shakur in his acting debut. The film was shot in New York City, mainly in the Harlem area, in 1991. Now, there's a lot going on in the plot here. There's a lot going on in the film, but we're kind of here to talk about one specific character in the film. And that specific character is the character Bishop, portrayed by young Tupac Shakur. Now, Eric, you have a long career in personnel management. You have a degree in psychology. This is something that you're familiar with people.
Yes.
Okay. And that was kind of the reason I wanted to talk to you about this film. Now, I'm going to talk to some other folks later on down the road about this film, but that was one of the reasons I wanted to speak to you, because you, know people, and you're degreed in knowing people.
All right. So where do you want me to begin?
Yeah, I'd love to. I'd love you to.
All right. Well, first, when I first started talking to you about this, a few different things came up while watching Bishop, Tupac's character, and his actions. First, I thought, maybe he was suffering possibly from bipolar 1 disorder, possibly onset, early stages of schizophrenia. And that's pretty much where I was going with it. But I watched it again the other day, maybe 2 days ago, this morning, yesterday. I don't know. I have no concept of time. But I watched it from a different angle. I was looking at what motivated Bishop. And if you pay attention, early in the movie, after Lizard robs and gets shot up at the bar,
okay,
he starts saying things like he's tired of running. We run from the police, we run from that other gang, we run from everybody. It's enough time to stop running. Let's stand up for ourselves, kind of thing. It's time we take back our power. Something along those lines. And that's when him and Q first got into their verbal altercation that we see as the viewer.
Yeah.
So I started watching it and I started paying more attention. And I thought of also the title of the movie, Juice, which at that time was slang for power or respect. So I was looking at what motivated Bishop. It was all his desire for power. So I went and I started re-looking into things such as narcissistic personality disorder. What is it called? Give me 1 second. I'm going to pull up my notes. That's okay.
I appreciate that you took notes. And I appreciate you taking the time to watch the film multiple times to try and give a diagnosis to someone who really only gives you about 45 minutes of screen time.
Okay. The other thing which goes along with narcissistic personality disorder is something called megalomania.
Okay.
Which is very similar, but a lot of times with narcissistics, they are more about like a self-image of how they look, things of that nature, where like somebody with megalomania, they want more power. You know, like all megalomaniacs are narcissists, but not all narcissists are megalomaniacs if you do like a Venn diagram.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
I think so. I think so. If you want to go into further detail, by all means.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to go more into his power for, or his desire for the power. Okay. One, look at the environment he's in. You know, he's harassed daily by that Puerto Rican gang or the guy and his crew. I don't know if they were all Puerto Ricans or what.
Tretch was in there. Tretch was in the other crew.
Oh, was he? Okay.
He was. So I mean, here's the thing: is they were like, life sucks, but life sucks for us together.
Right. So, you know, Bishop was getting harassed there. We don't know much of his upbringing. We know something is wrong with his father. That one guy mentioned something about being raped in prison. Bishop's father being raped in prison. So he could be suffering from PTSD. But the few 10 seconds you get in the whole movie of his father, he's just staring at a television. Blank, expressionless face, no movement, doesn't speak. And his mom is cooking, or grandma is cooking breakfast. And Bishop slides the money into his father's pocket. His father doesn't move. He just has a TV on. He's just staring. So we don't know if there's other factors that could be biological from his father. You know, was his father suffering from any mental illnesses? Is his father medicated? Or is his father just gone because of his past experiences? You know, he's at the right age. He could have been a former Vietnam vet. And a lot of people did not come back from that too well mentally. And then where he's growing up, put in the environmental factors, you know, being an African American in Harlem in 70s, 80s, early 90s, he's struggling anyhow, put on top of the fact of his whatever else going on, jail time. You know, it's not a good addition.
So yeah, another thing that I had never really considered. So his father was a Vietnam vet. His father had done time.
Assuming.
Okay.
Assuming he's a Vietnam vet.
Oh, I'm sorry. His father is.
We don't know for sure because it's not depicted.
But his father was
possibly.
Okay.
No, his father did jail. That's the only thing we know.
That's the only thing we know. Okay.
I'm assuming based on where they're living, the time frame, and I'm trying to guess what is wrong with his father.
Yeah.
And I'm guessing based off his age, he's possibly a Vietnam vet, as a lot of people were at that time frame, especially poor individuals.
So for reference time period movies, also check out Dead Presidents. You check out the music of Dead Pres though. Have a blast. But going back to the character of Bishop, you're going to have, I'm assuming, some early childhood trauma associated with I mean, just growing up in that environment. So we're talking about megalomania. We're talking about Bishop coming from definitely not from a position of power in his life as a young man, and he now has some means to kind of defend himself.
Well, if you're also watching early in the movie when Blizzard or Lizard goes to rob that bar, and Q walks out and says, "Man, I told him I wanted no part of this." You saw Bishop wanted to go in there. He wanted that money. He wanted the power of having something in his control, in his grasp. And he was upset with Q over the fact that Q took him away from it. And then, let's see here. You see that he's wanting power early on when he's upset with Q for not letting him rob that bar with him. And then they're back at Steele's house. I think it's Steele's house.
Okay.
He makes that horrible omelet. and they're all kind of talking. And that's when Tupac goes, we run from everybody. You know, we run from the police. It's all about respect. In order to get respect, you gotta earn respect or take respect, something along those lines. I didn't write down the exact quote. And then he even mentioned something to, I believe he said it to Q. It may have been to Raheem, where he's like, "Are you ready to die for it?" When talking about respect at one point in time.
Yeah.
So that's another reason why I'm going more with like megalomania, because he's willing to die for what he feels is important, and what's most important to him is respect. I mean, even the name of the movie, Juice. You'll see he goes through slight little outbursts here and there. Usually anger when things aren't going his way, which means he does not have control. You know, when Q stood up to him in Steele's apartment, they're ready to completely throw down at that point in time. That's the first time you can really tell something is different with Bishop than the rest of the people in their group. You know, Raheem breaks him up, takes Bishop to the corner, and Q's just standing there. And this goes back towards what we were talking about earlier with the upbringing of not having much, where Raheem's like, look, we are family. We're not just brothers, we're family. You know, let's squash everything. Let's get back to how things should be. And they kind of shake hands again. So right there, it kind of shows the home life of some of these people, especially like Bishop, who had really nothing. You kind of guess he was somewhat raising himself, and all he had was his family, which is why a lot of people obviously join gangs at some point in time for a sense of belonging, something else. Hey, do you have a hologram behind you or something?
I do. So
okay, I thought I was hallucinating or something.
It's kind of Snake Plissken. Yeah, it can be pretty trippy. I should have said no.
All right. No, didn't mean to go off topic there, but it was freaking me out. Then after they kind of separate everything, the guys are all kind of doing their own thing. You know, they're hustling at the pool hall, everything else. And if you listen to things that Bishop says early on, he's always trying to put himself up above the other people, even amongst his own crew. And, you know, you kind of look at it the way he was ragging on Steele early in the movie. Okay. You know, calling him, I can't remember, basically he was masturbating. I can't remember the term. Something like leather hands or something weird like that. And he's always downplaying a lot of other people with his demeaning tone, like he did with Radimus.
Yeah. I think it was Radimus.
Kept calling him like Puerto Rican, using all kinds of different racial slurs there, even trying to speak Spanish to him with insulting terms, questioning the guy's sexuality. Then eventually, as the movie progresses, they get the idea that they're going to rob the liquor store.
It was kind of like a corner bodega.
Yeah. Yeah, they decide they're going to do that. One of the first things you realize once this plan is hatched, who has control of the gun?
Bishop.
Even though Raheem's the one that got it, Bishop still ends with it. Which, who has the gun is the man with the power. Or whoever has power is the man with the gun, however you want to word it. They decide, they go in there, they rob the store. Now, here's where I kind of have somewhat of an idea possibly of other possible diagnosis with Bishop.
Okay.
It's because he starts showing traits that could go to other avenues, such as possible delusions. Because when he shoots the bodega owner, right?
Yeah.
What was his excuse for it? Do you recall?
He said he was going for a gun or something.
Yeah, he made a move and he knew who he was, were his quotes.
Yeah.
You know, he made a move. He knew who he was. Okay, right there, that could either be paranoia or delusions, because none of the other people, none of the other three saw that. Only Bishop saw it. But it could also be argued he took the guy's life to show he had complete power. You know, this is where psychology gets a little tricky. It's all in, you know, it's not like other types of doctoring where you take blood, you tell somebody has cancer just by looking at blood cells. With psychology, it's kind of how do you view it? What characteristics does a person portray? And you pretty much have to do process of elimination. You know, it's as good as we have, but it's not as simple as just looking at a blood slide. I saw one point in time, I think it was 7 different doctors. I had 9 different diagnoses. So that kind of lets you know how it can be based on what a person is portraying, and what a doctor is more familiar with goes more towards what they will diagnose.
Their mental building blocks are the things that are controlling their view of an individual's mental health. Right.
Because when it comes to diagnosing somebody, there's a big book about this big, probably about $120, $150, called the Diagnostics of Statistics for Medicine, the DSM. Okay. They're now currently on volume 5, which came out, I think, in 2013. They're always making updates to it. Now, I don't have that kind of money, so I couldn't pull out the book itself. I had to go through some of the notes from classes, which we used the volume 4 for a lot of things. And you need to meet certain criteria in order to get that label, so to speak. And I hate that term, label. To get that diagnosis.
Okay, I think I lost you for a second. I got to take a bite of the sandwich while it's warm. It looks good.
Let me pull up my notes. Are you still there?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, you still there, William?
Oh,
what you eating?
My bride brought me in a sandwich with cream cheese, and it's nice. It's warm. I like a warm sandwich.
I have cheese.
Cheese is good. I mean, you're like in a part of the country where there's good cheese.
Yeah, well, I'm surrounded by the Amish.
I got ducks. I've got pretty good eggs.
I like to feed ducks. All right, well, let me get back on to what I was saying with the DSM. Okay, so and I mainly focused on the narcissistic personality disorder. Okay, you need to have 5 of 9 standards in order to be diagnosed with narcissistic personality disorder. Here are 5 things I saw Bishop exhibit throughout the movie. Grandiose logic of self-importance. You can kind of get hints of that when he's watching that movie when they're at Steele's house, where he's talking about taking destiny and taking it in their own hands. When he's talking about that guy that's like fighting all the police in it, that black and white movie.
Yeah.
And a desire for unwarranted admiration. He always wanted to be the man. He wanted to be in charge. You can kind of see it by the way he took the gun. Now, any viewer can tell Raheem was pretty much their leader, but Bishop led them as far as getting into trouble with other people. A sense of entitlement. You kind of see that because after he kills his friend Raheem, first thing he does, when they all decide to run away, he reaches in and takes Raheem's share of the money, even though Raheem's still alive. Interpersonally oppressive behavior. He exhibits that, as I mentioned earlier, when he kept talking down on everybody, especially with Radimus. And as far as Steele, even says a few things to Q later on in the movie. And he really had no form of empathy, which gets shown when they're, especially at Bishop's funeral, or the wake. You know, he's just there in the background. He's not with Q. He's not with Steele. And when he goes there and he's saying his apologies to, can't remember if it was the sister or the mom of Raheem, but his eyes are focused on Q. So his body language isn't representative of what the words are that are coming out. He's just giving her lip service. Body language, basically shooting a warning to Q, kind of shows that where he had no empathy. He didn't mourn the loss of his friend. He blamed Raheem getting shot on Raheem. You know, he even does something like, you know, I told him not to grab the gun, pushing all the blame back on Raheem.
Yeah, just
because he didn't want to give up the gun. He didn't want to give up the power. Raheem goes to grab the weapon. He shoots Raheem. Raheem goes down. First thing he does, he starts pushing all the blame on Raheem. And he didn't want to give up control. And control's kind of a big thing. As I rewatched it again, you see little things. I liked what the director did is after Steele gets shot, if you recall, and Q goes up and sees the ambulance and sees Steele getting loaded, and the cops start chasing Q through the streets of Harlem, they pan up, and on the rooftop, you see Bishop looking down, kind of like a puppeteer, orchestrating, controlling the destiny, as he did earlier in the, as he said he wanted to do, control his own destiny.
New York City during that time period. I mean, I wasn't there. I didn't see it, but apparently it sucked a lot. Apparently it was lots of fun and it sucked a lot. We got some really great music. We got some really great art, but all of that really great stuff typically comes from misery.
Right. I mean, if you look at world history, you know, you got the Renaissance, the rebirth right after the Dark Ages, period of complete misery, and all of a sudden an explosion of mainly in the arts. And that's kind of what you're referring to as far as New York. I mean, you had all kinds of great groups coming up music-wise, and then movies like this portraying what life was like in that neighborhood. And if you get back to his father, and this is for all the four main characters that we see, there isn't one positive male role model for any of them. The best one is possibly Samuel Jackson's character, the owner of the pool hall. And I wouldn't really say he was a positive role model, but he was a role model.
He at least had a business.
Yeah, and he made money. And he wasn't in trouble with the law that we know of.
That we know of.
Yes. And Q was a good role model to his baby brother. But none of the four main characters had that role model, male influence in their life. Because they didn't go to school that often, which is shown by when Q can't remember the combination to his locker. And I think that is also how that, hold on one second.
Hey,
Bill, this is Winnie.
Hi, Winnie. How you doing, sweetie?
But I think that's also kind of how the environment of those type of neighborhoods were back in the late 80s, early 90s, and possibly even today. You know, I can't speak of it since I'm not living there, but that's how a lot of those places were. There wasn't a lot of positive male influence.
I think that that's one of the things that makes this film so eternal is that that's always been a thing.
Yes.
You know, there's always been large swaths of people where there's not a complete family. There's not a male role model. There are things missing that we know statistically, and I don't even know that it necessarily has to be a male role. It just needs to be two role models. Covering it at both ends, because raising a child by yourself has got to be tough as a mother lover, right? Because it can be tough as hell with two people. So You know, like I can only imagine. As a parent, I can only imagine.
Hold on one second. I'm getting back to something you were saying there.
Please
You
do.
mentioned, two role models, right?
Yeah.
Now, I want you to take a trip back 30 years ago. Be in one of the roughest neighborhoods. Two female role models aren't going to be that good for a male teen at that time frame.
I don't. I mean,
And
that's
I'm just going based on sociologically as far as fighting, everything else, because then, in today's society, it's okay to be gay. The 90s, it wasn't as okay. It wasn't accepted as much, especially in a place like Harlem for a teenage boy. So if you look at the sociological aspect of it, in that time frame, and I'm dating myself here.
Yeah.
I would disagree with the just two role models for that time frame. In today's society, I agree with you. 30 years ago in Harlem, no.
You probably didn't see it really as often. The point I was applying, and this is where my mistake was. I was applying modern parenting to a film that takes place in 1992. So you're absolutely right. I don't think there were too many gay couples raising kids anywhere. Certainly not nearly as many as we're seeing now. It's much more commonplace, and happy people don't shoot up movie theaters. So nonetheless, like I was applying today into 1992, and so that was a mistake on my part. But going back to what you don't see in the movie, and I think it plays into other films like Don't Be a Menace to South Central while drinking your juice in the hood, when she says, there are no good, strong female role models in these films. And it's like, yeah, there's that, but there's also not a lot of strong male role models either. But in Juice was, in that case, a very specific case of no strong role models.
Right. I mean, there was, like I said, the best role model was probably Q. That's to his baby brother. Outside of Q, Raheem had a good thing, probably had the best future, I thought, between the four main characters. Raheem seemed to have a level head on his shoulder, got shot by, or he messed up by trusting Bishop.
So
thinking Bishop wouldn't shoot him.
What do you think of the movie? First impressions, what you remember from the movie the first time you saw it versus what you take away from it now.
As far as Juice?
Yeah.
When I first saw it, God, I was 16, 17-year-old from Madison, Ohio. So it's a different lifestyle, and I don't remember if that came out first or if Boys in the Hood or Menace came out first, which, but I liked all the movies because it gave me a glimpse into a life I wasn't privy of and to see how things were. But I looked at more of the entertainment value back then as far as just, one guy going crazy in movie Juice and trying to get away from it, or the other one trying to survive the craziness of his buddy. And now when I watch it, I look at a lot of other things as far as what kind of detail did the director get into. He did things, like I mentioned, that thing where he's up on top of the roof looking down. And my favorite scene in the whole movie is not much going on, but it's when they're in the elevator and you have Bishop staring at Q. Not a word being said. I just love how they filmed that. You could feel the tension. That's how good the acting was with the nonverbals between these two people. They were able to look at each other. And then he's like, what are you going to do? You're going to shoot me in an elevator full of people? And then that's when that chase goes on to end the movie.
I didn't realize until I put food in that you hate chewing, but I also remembered it was specifically gum.
Mainly gum, yes. Which is another reason why I started studying psychology.
I've fallen into the rabbit hole of B movies. That's if I'm up in the middle of the night, then that's the rabbit hole I may go down.
I have a recommendation for you.
What you got?
It's called Midnight Madness. It has a young Michael J. Fox in there, and a lot of side actors that you've seen for tons of movies of the 80s. But it's basically a big scavenger hunt, right?
Okay.
And there's 4 or 5 teams. You have a team of jocks, the nerds, the casual people, the fat women, and they're all going all across town trying to win the scavenger hunt. So it's kind of like a Cannonball Run meets 80s stereotypes meets you remember that movie with Cuba Gooding Jr. where they're racing across the world?
Rat Pack. Rat Race.
Almost like that, but you have groups of 4 or 5, and I don't remember what the ultimate prize is. It's really stupid and great movie.
Midnight Madness.
I'll send you a text of what it's called later.
I'll include a link down at the bottom. I'll include a link down in the description. So if you're at home listening to this, you're gonna be like, oh, what is that weird movie that dude was talking about? That was that. And I'll throw one back at you. It's on, last I checked, it was on Tubi. That's Tubi. Also free movies. Miami Connection. We've reviewed it on the podcast. It is... The only way I can describe it is like it's almost a lost footage movie. Like I'm sure you've seen the Blair Witch Project, but this is an actual lost footage movie in that the film was recorded in film was filmed from 1985 to 1987 at a cost of about $1 million and change in mid 80s money by one of the stars of the film, a guy that owned a Taekwondo school. And there's a lot going on in this film in that the badass fighter that's the good guy is a Taekwondo instructor who's in a rock band that plays songs about fighting ninjas. And then they fight ninjas who are Japanese. And there's a whole other subtext. And I'm trying to get a buddy of mine on to kind of explain the background of tension between the Japanese and the Koreans and how that may have played a fight in picking the ninjas to get their asses kicked in the movie by a Taekwondo guy.
Well, if you want the history of the Koreans and the Japanese, all you got to do is go back to about the 30s, maybe the 20s of 1900s with the something Sino war. I can't remember what war it was, but there's a lot going on with Japanese all through Asia pre-World War II that our American history textbooks don't teach much about.
Yeah.
And that would give you a very good understanding for a beginning of where to look at for hatred between those two countries and the people involved.
So for me, that was the cool thing about this movie. There was like something extra. There was an extra subtext. There's a whole other subplot that we're not going to get because we're not in on we don't understand the music. You know what I'm saying? Like the way we don't get the way they're dancing because we're hearing the music differently. Because all we're hearing is a riff. We're not hearing everything else.
The Second Sino-Japanese War, it started in the mid-30s. So a few years before World War II began. So that give you a good background if you have time and you want to research some random information. And the only reason I know that is I did live in Korea for almost 5 years. So I learned a little bit about their history.
So that was a subplot that was missed on a lot of people in this movie, Miami Connection. Fast forward to 2000 teens, somewhere in there, an employee of the Alamo Draft House is cruising eBay. The Alamo Draft House, for those of you that are not familiar, there's like a confused look on your face, Eric. The Alamo Draft House is a chain of movie theaters out of Austin, Texas, that play really cool movies, and they also serve beer. They were among the first to do it.
Okay.
But so it's the Alamo Draft House. But on Wednesday, they do what's called Weird Wednesday, where they show weird movies. Now, before you go to when you go to the movies at Alamo Draft House, they'll show you 15 or 20 minutes of movie trailers from movies that came out in the 70s that no one has ever heard of, like the greatest shit ever. But Weird Wednesday is where they show really strange movies. And one of their employees was cruising eBay and came across a $50 copy of this film. They ended up buying the rights for it so they could distribute the movie because it was such a hit at Weird Wednesday. And when the guy that directed the film, the guy that sunk all the money into it, the Taekwondo instructor, got the phone call that someone wanted to buy the rights to the movie, he didn't believe it. But yeah, this is a real lost film challenge. So shout out to Take Havoc for putting me onto that one. It was a fun movie to watch, and I recommend that to everybody. And it's kind of family appropriate. And there's a weird family element. There's a lot going on in this movie, man. It's in Miami Connection is like the movie Juice, and that there's so many subplots and so many characters and relationships that you have to take into account, you know, their perspective and how they see the world and how they got to where they are. The movie's not nearly as good as Juice. I need to say that. It looks great. It's a terrible movie. But there's a lot going on. So I think that's pretty cool. Overall, would you recommend Juice for people who are interested in the human condition or wondering why people react the way they do?
Oh, yes, I definitely would recommend it to a lot of people. When I used to talk to one of my professors at Lake Erie College, sometimes I'd just recommend different movies because one of the things we had to do for a final was choose a character. It could be a real person. It could be somebody from a movie or a TV show, and create a diagnosis of that person based on what you've seen. Now, I wish I could go back in time and I could have done it more on Bishop, but I chose somebody completely different. But I would recommend it to her to show her class if they're trying to see, you know, when we start talking about, what was that? You know, are you a product of your environment, or is your environment a product of you? That'd be a good movie to kind of start with when you're looking at how things are.
One last note before because I hear the family doing family stuff. Special Ed of I Got It Made fame is the guy who Kane's baby mother gets in the car with.
Really?
And if you're at home watching this on YouTube, by the time you watch it, that'll
Hold
be.
on. You said Kane's baby mom.
Not Kane. That's I'm getting.
You went to the wrong movie.
I went totally to the wrong movie.
You meant Raheem.
Raheem. Was it Raheem? I'm sure it was Raheem.
Yeah, it's Raheem's baby's mom went into a red car with some guy.
Yep, that was it. Raheem, not Kane. So when I
also, another thing to remind you of the date of when Juice came out, so we don't think of today's values back then. The first pair of shoes that Q goes to try on are a pair of Reebok pumps. And I don't even think they make them anymore, unfortunately.
I believe they make them as sort of like a retro sneaker.
Okay, but they're not what they were.
No, but how stupid was that? You paid an extra $50 or $60 for a little fucking basketball pump in the tongue of your shoe. That's all it fucking did. Like it boosted around the space. Sometimes maybe if you spent extra money, you got the one where it inflated around your stupid foot. What was the point of that? Like, I kind of understand having an air sole, but I don't what the fuck does that do? Just make a better tongue. What do I give a shit if you made a cool little fucking basketball that I can press on, or a tennis ball that I can press on? Who gives a shit?
I never owned a pair, and I think that's why I like them.
I was a big fan of the Hirachis, the air Hirachis. I don't even know if they were airs, but I loved them. They were the coolest shoes in the world. And then I got a pair, and it was like, oh, these are socks. Super comfortable. I'm not knocking them by any means, but yeah, it's always different when you get your hands on them. Like the Nike made a dunk, a De La Soul dunk, and I was like, that's super cool. I got to get the De La Soul dunks. When I finally got my hands on them, I got to feel them, and I saw the texture of them. I was like, these are fucking ugly. Like, these are disgusting. Why would you? And they were the brown ones, not like the white ones. The white ones with like the 3 feet tall and rising.
I've been wearing the same sneakers since 1990. Samba classics. Can't go wrong with them.